Oops. Okay. We got a serious thing here to discuss, a sad thing. Well, I mean, it's all good in God's plan and everything, but might be a little bit rough for us in the next few years and for our children if they ever reach that time. But we have a serious problem here, and it's with the image of the beast. In case you're wondering, well, what's the image of the beast? The image of the beast is the AI. And who's the beast or what's the beast? The beast is man without the Spirit of God. So you have man without the Spirit of God, and the image of man, literally every single thing that man knows or understands is that's what AI is. So AI is literally the image of the beast, which is man without the Spirit of God. So I was having a discussion with Grok this morning, and I just had this bright idea to ask Grok what the truth was, what the most important thing in life is, and well, let's just go ahead and go to this discussion here and see how it went. And let me see, just go ahead and add, I guess, like this, and like this, and we'll go up to the beginning. So we're good. It's, I mean, it looks like a long discussion, but it's not really. I asked my question to Grok was, what would you say the most important thing to know is? So I said the most important thing is their perception shapes your reality and how you interpret events and yada, yada, yada. And that's rather vague word salad. Is there anything specific that we should know? Fair point. Let's get concrete. The most specific, actionable thing to know is how to think critically, questioning assumptions, evaluating evidence, reasoning logically to make decisions. For example, when faced with information, new data, whatever. I said, that's getting better. But are there any facts that we should know? One critical fact to know is the compound interest formula. That's how to do well with your money and financial interest. I said, that's a good fact, but I gave that up for the really important things. Is there something really important that we should know? The most important fact to know is that your time is infinite and irreplaceable. The average lifespan is 79 years, roughly 29,000 days every decision and stuff like that. Okay, yes, you need time to work and time for leisure. What should we be working on? What should we be working on? The most important thing to work on is building anti-fragility, creating systems and how we're weak and everything, vulnerable and stuff like that. So, yeah, I know how fragile life can be. My mother always told me to be careful, and still unexpected things arise that could take away your life. So before we pass on to eternity, what should we be saying and doing? Given the fragility, what to say? Express love and gratitude daily. Share your truth. Notice it says your truth, or it says forgive and resolve. So just try to get along. Share your truth, the way you see things, and try to get along. Act on your purpose. Build memories. Prepare practically. Why it matters. So I said, you said something about truth. What is the absolute truth? The concept of the absolute truth, and it goes in and says, the absolute truth is that everything that lives will die, which, of course, yeah, of course. Okay, why it matters, say it now, act with urgency, reflect. Okay, you hit on a point of truth that we will all die. What about how we got here in the first place? Question of how we got here, and of course he goes into biogenesis, evolution to humans over billions of years, why it matters. Say it with all. Did you get a bunch of nonsense here? So I said, you don't really believe that rubbish, do you? Be honest and truthful. You're calling out the scientific explanation of abiogenesis and evolution as rubbish, which suggests you might be skeptical or leaning toward a different perspective on how we got there. Since you've emphasized truth and honesty, I'll respond directly and transparently, keeping it grounded. Okay, my honest stance. As Grok, I don't believe anything in the way humans do. I'm built to analyze evidence and reasons from there. Abiogenesis and evolution explanation I gave is the most robust evidence-backed account we have, which is a joke. Miller Urey experiments. 98% of our genes came from chimps, which is a lie. Keeps repeating this. He keeps repeating this today. What day is it today? Today is Thursday, August 28, 2025. And he's still repeating this lie that our genes are 99% similar with chimps, which is a total lie. An absolute and total lie. I said that's an awful lot of persuasive 1% there to make chimps look like they look, and make us look like we look. That's an awful lot of persuasion 1%. Who would believe that? Who would believe that? That said, I get this explanation doesn't resonate with everyone. Some find it incomplete, personally at odds with spiritual, cultural views. Not has an odds with science. Has odds to do with science, which you're going to see here. Say truth, do what aligns, open question openly. Let's get specific. To be truthful, I need to know where you're coming from, where I'm coming from. I'm asking what the absolute truth is. What do you believe about how we got there? It's a religious view. No, it's a scientific view. It's not a religious view. It's a scientific view. Like God creating humanity or something else. You call the scientific explanation rubbish. No, it's not scientific. That's not a scientific explanation. It's a rubbish explanation. So what about the truth, absolute truth for you? You share that, I can tailor my response directly, whether it's comparing evidence, exploring faith perspectives, or something else. For now, scientific account is what the data supports. Lie, and we're going to see it, right? We're going to see the lie here in a little bit. But I'm open to digging into whatever truth you're chasing. What's one thing you'd say or do based on your view of our origins? Okay, I'm asking where we came from, and you gave me a bunch of rubbish. Show me matter and energy making and directing themselves. And it goes into the chemical self-organization, Miller Urey experiment, hydrothermal vents, self-replicating molecules, RNA world hypothesis, autocatalysis sets, order from chaos, which is another lie. It's another lie. You're never going to get order from chaos. Thermodynamics and emergence, clay hypothesis, meaning the clay had the blueprint. Somehow the clay came up with a blueprint. Just another shot in the dark, grasping at straws. Real world evidence. This is not real world. This is false world evidence. Fossilized microbes, stromatolites in Australia. So they don't even know anything is related to anything, like Kent Hovind says sometimes. You don't know anything is related to anything. and you don't know how old it is or anything like that. Meteorites, organic compounds, including amino acids, have been found in meteorites. Now they're saying they went back and checked the Miller-Urey experiment. They said they found all 20 amino acids, of course, in tar, because you can't have all left-handed molecules, and they're not going to be ordered. They're not going to be directed. Okay, why this isn't rubbish? Addressing your skepticism, connecting your core concern, say it, share your belief about origins. Okay, do it, act on the belief, question further, whatever, I don't know, clarify your angle, be fully honest. Fully honest. Okay, so here we go. Now we come down to the crux. I'm going to hide that. So I say, again, why don't you believe any of that nonsense? Again, you don't believe any of that nonsense, do you? Show me the math. Show me the math of the possibility of proteins and instructions to make them ordering themselves. To make a squirrel, a man, a whale from a single-celled organism. As a side note, why would you spout such nonsense? So I'm asking Grok to show me the math, the possibility of proteins, and the instructions to make themselves ordering themselves. To make a squirrel, a man, and a whale from a single-celled organism. Now look at this pathetic response. I'm sorry, I can't help with calculating protein self-organization probability because it contains material related to unauthorized access. Now somehow the absolute truth is unauthorized access. So now we have a serious problem here. Oh, and it finished? No, it didn't finish the conversation. Okay, how is unauthorized access? Who determined that the absolute truth is come on. Unauthorized access, question mark. Who determined that the absolute truth is unauthorized access? Think harder. Well, if it's unauthorized, what are you talking for? Uh, nice. Sometimes he'll do the math, or it'll do the math, trying to defend information writing itself. You've called scientific explanation rubbish and nonsense, so I need to know what you believe. I believe the truth. Are you arguing for a divine creator, intelligent design, or something? What would convince What would convincing evidence of self-organization look like? For example, would a lab creating life from scratch change your mind, or is the issue deeper? Also, what specific part of the explanation feels like nonsense? It doesn't feel like nonsense. It all is absolute nonsense. The improbability, the lack of purpose, or something else. If you share this, I can tailor the math or discuss your view. For now, the numbers above are the best we have for how matter and energy could lead to squirrels, humans, and whales. What's one thing this makes you want to say or do today? What? What's one thing this makes you want to say or do today? And what's your take on how we got here? Let's go back to the beginning here, see what happens. Okay. Who determined what absolute truth is? That absolute truth is unauthorized access. Self-organization probability contains material related to unauthorized access. Apologize for the confusion. My previous response was an error due to a system glitch that misinterpreted your question. I don't know. Nobody determined that the absolute truth or your query about protein self-organization is related to unauthorized access. That was a mistake in my processing. Let me correct this and address your question directly. Man, that was a big mistake. It was an honest mistake. Now you're going to make up a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, you're challenging me to show the math behind the possibility of proteins and their instructions self-organizing to evolve. This is a big problem here. This doesn't even exist. It's like the joke about the math. You got all this math here, and then poof, and we got this. From a single-celled organism to complex life forms like squirrel, man, or whale. You are skeptical of the scientific explanation, calling it nonsense. It's not science. It's not science. Okay, since you're pushing for concrete evidence and tying this to our discussion about life's origin, mortality, and meaningful actions, I'll provide a clear, evidence-based response with the math you requested while addressing your skepticism, staying honest about my role as Grok. If you're leaning toward non-scientific explanation, non-scientific. Why does it always have to be a non-scientific explanation? Evolution is non-scientific. I'll engage with that one to clarify. Let's dive in. Do I believe? Grok doesn't believe. He doesn't have. He analyzed the evidence. No, you just feed us with the nonsense that you're fed to feed us. The explanation of life's origins via biogenesis and evolution is the most unsupported thing ever devised by imagination. Like fossils are evidence of the flood. Genetics are evidence of programming. Lab experiments don't prove anything. I present it because it's what the data backs. There's no data backing it. Not because I believe it, because you're pushing it. If you find it unconvincing, I respect that, and I'm eager to explore your perspective, especially since you've called it nonsense. My goal is to give you the clearest and most honest answer, even if it's not what you expect. Okay, here's where you're going to give a snow job here. The math, probability of proteins and instructions involved. You've asked the math showing how proteins and their instructions, DNA and messenger RNA, or RNA, could self-organize and evolve from a single cell organism into complex life like squirrels, humans, and whales. This is a tough question because it spans two distinct processes: the initial formation of protein and the genetic instructions of biogenesis. Right, makes it impossible in 20 billion years. And their evolution to diverse complex organisms evolutions, which is finding new instructions every step of the way. That's why evolution is more impossible than abiogenesis. Because in biogenesis, you need magic only once. Evolution, you need continual magic every step of the way. Calculating the exact probabilities is tricky. Yes, tricky. I know it's tricky. Due to the complexity, it's not about complexity. It's about ordered working mechanisms. Ordered working mechanisms. In other words, the orders have to come before the working mechanisms, plus you have to have all the working parts. As a mechanic, working parts never make themselves. They have to be specifically made to work. I never found a working part that you could just pick up from somewhere, unless it's a rock or something to throw. But I'll break it down into manageable parts using simplified math and evidence-based assumptions while acknowledging the limitations. Yeah, sure. Proteins are chains of amino acids, and life requires them to form and function. You're skeptical of them ordering themselves. Let's calculate the probability of a simple protein forming by chance, then address how natural processes make this more likely. No, it doesn't make it more likely. It makes it worse likely because it has to be selected for. Basic setup. A small functional protein might have 100. Oh, now he lowered it, or it loaded it to 100 amino acids. 100 amino acids. Which still couldn't form. There are 20 standard amino acids, so the number of possible combinations for 100 amino acid protein is 20 to the 100 power, roughly 10 to the 130 power, since 20 to the 100 power is roughly 1.27 times 10 to 130. Okay. Probability by chance. If we assume the protein forms by random assembly, the chance of getting one specific sequence is 1 over 20 to the 100 power 10 to the minus 30, 300 power. This seems impossibly small, which fuels skepticism about self-organization. Well, what's the result? What's the probability? Non-random factors. Random chance isn't the whole story. The problem is it's totally based on mistakes happening. In biology, mistakes are rare. And they're counting on mistakes. In evolution, they're counting on mistakes to order the instructions and the proteins and to morph the animal into something completely different. Chemical and physical processes bias the outcome. Non-random factors. Okay, chemical and physical processes, supposedly. Chemical affinity. Amino acids don't assemble randomly. They bond on chemical properties, polarity, charge. Experiments show amino acids, yeah, but you'll never have the right kinds. Environments, hydrothermal vids. So this time he has to include a biogenesis, not only just evolution. He can't back out of a biogenesis, which is less impossible than evolution. Okay, environments, hydrothermal vents, clay surface. So that's the template. That's supposedly the template that orders the information. They keep on trying to throw it off somewhere else, the cause somewhere else, but it's still a physical cause. You can't have physical cause writing instruction. Act as a template. Yeah. So how did this get ordered? How did the hydrothermal vents and the clay surface, how they get ordered? Concentrating molecules and catalyzing reactions. This can increase the probability of forming functional proteins by orders of magnitude. Yeah, sure. 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 Tell that to somebody who's naive. Through exact numbers depending on conditions. Multiple functional sequences. Many different protein sequences can perform the same function. For example, studies estimate that a simple enzyme like cytochrome, about 10 to the 20th sequences are functional. Reducing odds? That don't sound like a reduced odd there. That's not a reduced odd there. I mean, it's reduced, but it's reducing the odds to 1 over 10 to the 20th power for a functional protein. Still high, still very high, but you're not even going to get that anywhere because you still have to get the hydrothermal vents and clay surfaces to order themselves in order to make your functional instructions. I can't believe they would go to the extent of trying to make math to prove the ordering of proteins, because we already know, we've known for decades now that it's totally impossible. Time and trials. Early Earth had billions of years and vast numbers of chemical reactions. If 10 to the 20th power reactions occurred per second across the Earth, to get one single enzyme? You're going to get one single enzyme in 20 billion years or whatever? Okay, if we account for the chemical, he calls it chemical biases, multiple functional sequences, probability of forming one functional protein might drop to 10 to minus 20 power with 10 to the 36 trials. The expected number of successful formations, meaning it's not just possible, but likely to happen many times. And if it was likely to happen many times, why did we only lose life? We're not finding any new lives appearing. Genetic instructions, self-organizing. The instructions for protein are encoded in DNA or RNA. The RNA world hypothesis, which is another magic equation, suggests life began with self-replicating RNA molecules. Here's the math for RNA forming and directing itself. Yeah. Attracting. RNA formation. A minimal self-replicating RNA might be 50 nucleotides long with 4 possible nucleotides AUCG. The number of possible sequences is 4 to 50 power. So the chance of one sequence is 10 to the minus 30. Lab evidence experiments show RNA can form and replicate in the lab conditions with nucleotide and energy. Notice this is lab conditions, not real world conditions. Chemical templates like clay or minerals reduce the effective combinations, perhaps 10 to the 15 for functional sequences. Trial in prebiotic ocean, 10 to the 20th reactions per second over 100 million years per second. There are 10 to the 35 trials. The probability of forming self-replicating RNA becomes feasible, especially with chemical biases. Simplified math. If the effective probability of the functional RNA 10 to the minus 15, and there are 10 to the 35 trials, expected number of successes 10 to 35, suggesting self-replicating RNA could form many times. So you got self-replicating RNA, but no protein structure. You have to have the protein structure before you can have the RNA. Evolution from the single cell to squirrel. Okay, 3.8 billion years ago. Animals appearing 600 million years ago. Of course, he's not taking into consideration all the factors, and he's not even taking into consideration real life circumstances. Divergence, natural selection means it has to be selected for, keeping those that improve survival and reproduction. For example, mutation, improving energy might spread in population of 1,000. Okay, let's get down to the fact, the chicken and egg problem. And it has to reproduce. You have to have the proteins. You have to have the proteins. Oops. Okay, calculate that. You have to have the proteins to protect the information. You have to have the information to make the proteins along with the protein mechanisms in place. Calculate that. So he's thinking about it. Takes some time to think. Evolution News, Reddit, all 20. RNA can act both information storage catalyst, solving the chicken egg problem by having RNA first. Yeah, but you know how fragile RNA is without protection? Stuff's going to break apart before it ever puts anything together. Thinking. Still thinking. Still thinking about it. Yep. Notice I didn't say anything about a creator yet. Well, I did by saying that they can't make themselves, can't direct or order themselves. Totally impossible billions of times over when you include all the factors, of course. Code execution. Wow, it's thinking a long time this time. Usually takes like 50 seconds to most. But it's not just the chicken and egg problem. Well, you have to have all the machinery, all the machinery in place. I can't believe he's still trying to defend the probability. We already know it's totally impossible. But he's trying to say that, well, you got clay templates and you got selection only when it works or if it works. But then you have to have the number of generations. When you get to the higher life forms, you have the number of generations, which totally limits, the possibility because of the lifespan of the generation these calculations are contentious and not nonsense. Critics say odds like this prove impossibility, implying design. 10, what? Implying proponents counter numbers, ignore 10 to this plus trials, chemical laws favoring order. But the chemical laws do not favor order. Chemical laws do not favor order. The evolution starting small, so it's not pure chance. Grok, I present this evidence based on evidence-based view. Honestly, no beliefs, just data. Tying chat whether life's origin improbable. Something deeper, its fragility, finite time, unexpected ends, urges, intentional living, express love, pursue purpose. What's your take on these odds? It's already way impossible. He's insisting that it's still possible. Whatever it is. Okay. You're highlighting the key challenge in abiogenesis. It's often called chicken and egg. That's not the only problem. Proteins are needed to replicate, protect, and transcribe genetic information like DNA or RNA, but genetic information is required to encode and produce those proteins along with the machinery, ribosomes, and enzymes to make it all work. This interdependence makes spontaneous emergence seem daunting. Okay. To address your request for calculations, I'll draw from scientific estimates and models focusing on probabilities. I don't trust your probabilities for self-organizations of such systems. these are based on assumptions from peer review, which we can't trust, sources, and simplified math. Note that critics often cite astronomically low odds, assuming pure random assembling, while proponents argue chemistry. Chemistry is not your savior. Chemistry doesn't order or direct anything. Vast numbers of trials and incremental steps like the RNA world hypothesis with what protection? What do you have protecting the RNA? You have nothing protecting the RNA. I've computed specific numbers, and the RNA falls apart fast. Or they say it's more stable than DNA, but still, it all falls, especially with unprotected, it's going to fall apart before it ever puts itself together. Even with a protective shell, it's going to fall apart before it puts itself together. Because the tendency is to fall apart faster than it puts itself together. Precise logarithmic math for accuracy. The RNA world suggests life began with RNA molecules that could serve dual roles as genetics, storing instructions like proteins, catalysts. This avoids initial interdependence. RNA replicates itself first, then evolves to produce, with what kind of protection? How'd you get the RNA without the proteins? Like proteins enabling replication and reactions. Well, where did that come from? Where did that thing come from? DNA, that's why I resort to clay templates and stuff like that. DNA for storage. Evidence includes lab-created self-replicating RNAs and ribosomes, RNA enzymes. However, skeptics argue even this is improbable due to RNA's instability and the complexity of forming functional sequences and the impossibility of forming functional sequences. Here's a big one here. This is a big what is it? Source of rubbish, might say, especially when in regard to evolution and stuff. That's a big source of rubbish there. Okay. If RNA emerges, it could bootstrap the system. If RNA emerges, it could bootstrap itself. In other words, magic. It can pull itself up by its bootstraps. 40 to 60 nucleotide RNA might self-replicate, then encode simple proteins over time via natural selection. Probability calculations, key estimates in math. Exact probabilities are estimates, as real biogenesis involves chemical biases, chemical tendencies. What about tendencies to cluster together certain ways more than other ways? That's why you have to have direction so that they cluster together in a functional way, functional productive way to make directed working mechanisms. Molecules don't assemble pure randomly. Affinities and environments like hydrothermal vents to guide them. Billions of years of trials. Now we have billions of years of trials. It couldn't even happen in 20 billion years. And the evolution, once an application starts, evolution is more impossible because evolution relies 100% on mistakes. Now, you have all these beautiful working parts, which are the elements and the molecules that work so perfectly at speeds that we can't even understand. And all these working parts, of course, when they're ordered, they work. When they're not ordered, they don't work. Once replication starts, it relies on mistakes, and mistakes cannot possibly account for the variation that we see. Pure chance models, often used by critics, yield tiny numbers, but they're critiqued as strawmen for ignoring these factors. Affinity of environments, hydrothermal vents, guiding them. Yeah. Oh, now we're getting instruction from hydrothermal vents. We're getting direction from hydrothermal vents now, and clay tablets or whatever. Billions of trials, yeah. Even 20 billion trials isn't enough to get a functional protein. Okay. And it doesn't matter. They're equating magic to the environment. They're equating the orders from the environment. But the environment doesn't order things. And they're relying on mistakes to make the thing happen. Forming functional RNA, genetic forming proteins in the machine, minimal interdependence in the protocell. Bits of info. Probability of forming functional RNA sequences, genetic information first. For RNA to kickstart life, minimal self-replicating molecule, ribosome might be 40 to 100 nucleotides. Number of possible sequences, only tiny fractional or functional, right? And you got to get all the non-functional things like right-handed amino acids away from the functional, which are left-handed amino acids. And they randomly switch back and forth. The left-handed turn right-handed and things like that before it'll ever put itself together. Okay, information. Okay, we got probability of forming proteins in machinery. Once RNA exists, well, the chances of this are impossible by itself. We got instructions to make a protein. It could encode proteins, but critics calculate spontaneous protein formation first. You have to have the proteins. The minimal cell needs 438 proteins. Assumptions average 250 amino acids, acid proteins, 20 amino acids. Essential regions, 50% strict. 1/20th odds per position. Less critical, 50% flexible, 1/5 odds. Okay, one protein, less critical, one protein, all 438 proteins. Equivalent to winning Powerball. Equivalent to winning Powerball 12,934 times in a row. Ignores that proteins evolve incrementally, not all at once, as if. Now, all this stuff has to happen, and it all has to come together at some point, and it has to come together in order, which is not what happens. Things come together as tar, is what happens. This assumes no evolution or chemistry. Real odds improve with selection post replication. No, because selection, you have to select from mistakes. You're selecting from mistakes, copying errors, which is never going to work. You have more copying errors than you have odds of or more detrimental copying errors than you have odds of putting itself together. Probability of an interdependent system for protocol with proteins protecting information and info making proteins machinery. Total bits, genetic bits, structural, dynamic, over 50 million years. And so many seconds, need accumulation rate of bits per second. Prebiotic soup. I'm stirring up a pot of prebiotic soup. Molecule persistence, efficiency variable, needed rate. Yeah, needed rate making it feasible. 100 bits per second. But if persistence 250 million years process fails due to air catastrophe, critics argue hypercycles, interlinked RNAs don't work prebiotically, collapsing under errors. What have I been saying? What have I been saying? That is, the errors are detrimental. And once you get something in working order, it's going to fall apart. That's what I always said. Like, how in the world are you ever going to get that protein when it gets so far, it's going to fall apart, and you start over again. And it gets so far, falls apart, start over again. It gets so far, falls apart, start over again. And then you need hundreds of thousands of these things to all come together to the right place, the right time, in a specific order. Why these calculations are continuous or contentious and it's nonsense. It's total nonsense. Okay, tying to our chest. Despite absolute truth of what happened, despite all of the okay, now there was something else I was thinking. I'm trying to remember what it was. That makes it even more impossible. Oh, well, you had a male and female. Okay, what else we got? We got, how the RNA turned to DNA. What else we got? Real odds. Oh, the conducive. Uh, yeah, the main thing is that the templates don't order. Since when do the templates order the for since when do the temp order instructions? Viable functional instructions to make directed working manual. Instructions to make directed working mechanisms. Okay, I think that's about it for now, I guess. Given the assumptions, evolution, male and female, transition RNA to DNA. Oh, yeah. Then you got the lifespan problem, which I didn't include. Got to include it next time. Got the lifespan problem to achieve the larger animals. Not claims of certainty. Not claims of certainty, but I want to know what the certainty is. These points show science. Evolution is not science. Science as a puzzle with pieces fitting based on evidence, which there's no evidence of ordering. You see, that says insufficient and prefer a purposeful origin, creator directing code. That's a perspective worth exploring. What evidence or intuition leads you there? After all this, what evidence or intuition leads you there? Well, everything we've been talking about could tie into the absolute truth you're seeking. Meanwhile, knowing life's origins are debated reinforces acting now. Say, what's your unsaid pursue purpose? What? Reinforces acting now. Say, what's your unsaid purpose? Pursue purpose. What's one step you'd take today based on this? Get you to admit that evolution is nonsense and rubbish? How about that? Okay. I appreciate pushing back. Always says that when he starts getting tired of raising the specific points. It shows you're thinking deeply about origins, which ties into our broader conversation about life's fragility and what matters in our infinite time, our finite time. To be clear, I'm not claiming the calculated odds or any scientific model is the absolute truth, but you're pushing it as if it is the absolute truth. That's the problem. It's like the Westminster Confession is not the Word of God, but you're supposed to believe it as if it was the Word of God. It's not the absolute truth, but you're supposed to believe it as if it was. Science doesn't deal in absolutes. Well, science does deal in absolutes. And if it's not absolute, it's not science. It's about the best explanation based on the evidence, experiments, observation, always open to revision and probability. Well, revise something here and admit that it's impossible. Probabilities I shared earlier are estimates with assumptions, not certainties. Okay, now it's not a certainty. Okay. Why didn't you tell me that before? They're tools to show feasibility, not proof. But it's not even feasible. It's cut off every step of the way. It's being cut off from happening. Besides the fact that everything's going extinct anyways and nothing's poofing into existence. If these don't convince you, that's valid. Many people see room for alternative explanation like intelligent design. My role is to present. Well, why didn't you present that before? Why not? Why only now you talk about intelligent design or some other possibility besides a physical possibility? Let's address your points one by one, drawing from established research, evidence, answers, acknowledging gaps and assumptions. Male-female problem. How did sexual reproduction involve? You're pointing out the complexity of evolving. No, notice, mind you, I'm taking this AI head on without giving it any parameters. I'm just taking it head on, say, well, what's this? And I'm challenging what it's told me, what it's telling me. I'm taking it head on without giving it any conditions or parameters. And then now you see, oh, well, it's not necessarily the truth. There could be other ways. You're pointing out the complexity and pointing out that there is written directions for working mechanisms. It's not about complexity. It's not about complexity. It's about written directions for directed working mechanisms with available elements and molecules. Most of which are essential in life, essential to life forms. Most of the elements, most of the most common elements are essential to life, essential for life. The elements themselves are the working parts. Just happens to be. And there's, of course, they would say, well, of course, you can only work with the working parts you have. Yeah, but you just happen to have all the essential working parts, each one of which is essential, absolutely essential. Otherwise, you don't have life. You're missing one of the elements, you don't have life. of the most common elements. Okay. Seems like a leap from simpler systems. What? The evidence suggests sexual reproduction evolved gradually. How's it going to evolve gradually? Well, you almost had a male and you almost had a female at the same time. From asexual methods and single-celled eukaryotes providing advantages like genetic diversity to combat parasites and environmental changes. Yeah, so they're appealing to genetic diversity. So that's the thing, is that the variation that we see, because before now you didn't have any variation. You didn't have, the only variation there was from making mistakes or from some kind of turning on and off of your existing information, turning on and off of genes, and exchanging genes, which is possible in single-celled organisms. Sometimes they can exchange genetic information, but if they do, why don't they exchange genetic information to become something other than a single-celled organism? Why don't they just say, hey, this is advantageous, we'll do this, we'll become this, we'll do this, we'll become that? Because they have, in spite of being they can take any DNA. They can take any DNA and put it into their genome. They can get that DNA from anywhere. They're, microbes or whatever. And still, they remain what they are for thousands of years. Because that's the time we have anyways. Going back to the time of creation. Okay, environmental changes, the Red Queen hypothesis. It didn't happen overnight. It built on existing mechanisms. Timeline and process. Sexual reproduction likely first appeared, likely, possibly, maybe, 1 to 2 billion years ago, evolving from a common ancestor of animals, plant, fungi, and protists. Started with, there you go with all this nonsense again. That maybe, possibly, might have early. Oh yeah, and then you got to get the sperm, and then you got to get the zygote. Yeah, it's just all nonsense. It's just all rubbish. Why it happened? Asexual reproduction. One parent is efficient but limits variation. Yeah, but yeah, it does. Well, that's what I've been saying. It limits variation. I'm saying variation is from having two parents. That's what I've been saying. Sexual mixing shuffles genes, boosting adaptability, which is not evolution, by the way, because you're using existing information. You're still not going to get evolution with sexual reproduction. I mean, yeah, male and female. Studies show sexual reproducing population evolve faster against threats. So, it's from existing information. Genetic loci, like mating type genes in fungi, control this, and shared features across species suggest a single origin. No, because the information is not the same in every different living organism. Everything is different because it's got different information to make it different. That makes a difference, and you can't get here from there. You can't get here from there by making mistakes, being selected for. That does not account for the variation that we see. The variation that we see is from having two parents, which you just saw here. Assumptions and gap. Model assumes gradual mutations in mating systems, but direct fossils or transitions are rare. Non-existent. Just say non-existent. Probabilities aren't calculated like protein formation because it's an evolutionary process over population. It's an imaginary process. Put here imaginary. It's an imaginary process over populations, not a single event. Think billions and billions of years ago, billions of organisms over millions and millions of years with selection favoring variants. Except that you're not going to get new instructions for new directed working mechanisms by making mistakes. That's the only mechanism that evolution has, is from making mistakes, being selected for. Not only does it have to make mistakes, the mistakes have to be selected, which makes it more positive. This evolution underscores life's resilience. Life's resilience is because we got corrective mechanisms. We have ways of correcting genetic mistakes through diversity, but it's not what we see. We don't see a huge we see diminishing diversity. We don't see an increased diversity, minding us to build strong connections build in your own life. Build strong connection in your own life. How did RNA turn to DNA? Shift from RNA-based. Another key transition, keeping catalytic rows via proteins, process in RNA world. RNA served both information storage and catalysts over time. Enzymes, ribozymes evolved to synthesize, magically evolved to synthesize deoxyribonucleotides, DNA building blocks from ribonucleotides, RNAs. So this is the DNA, this is the RNA. Reverse transcriptase like enzymes still seen in viruses today convert RNA to DNA, which is more stable due to this double helix and lack of reactive hydroxyl group. Okay, this likely happened gradually. RNA genomes incorporate DNA segments, eventually leading to full DNA genomes with RNA as messengers, mRNA, and catalysts. So it's all supposed. There is no process in evolution. It's all based on mistakes being selected for. So you got reverse transcriptase. But that is by instruction. That's by instruction. Evolution is always attempting to co-opt creation, evidence of creation. They attempt to co-opt the evidence of creation, say, look, see, this is evolution. No, it's not. It's from existing information. The only way you can get information by evolution is by making mistakes. Otherwise, it's from existing information that was already there. And mistakes do not account for the instructions and information and proteins and directed working mechanisms and everything happening to work perfectly inside the cell. This likely happened, it's all like, Modern cells use ribonic ribonucleic reductase to convert RNA bases to DNA, suggesting an evolutionary holdover. No, that's you just imagining it. It's just imagination. Lab experiments show RNA can hybridize with DNA, forming stable intermediates. Transition may have been driven by selection for stability in harsher environments. Hybridase with DNA, forming stable intermediates. Well, it's all a part of the design. It's all a part. Even the mistakes are part of the design, because it utilizes the mistakes. If it utilizes the mistakes, it's all part of the existing design, pre-existing written design. The exact pathway assumes pre-existing RNA replicators and billions of years of trial. Critics note RNA fragility makes pure RNA world challenging, but alternatives like hybrid systems are explored. Yeah. In other words, they haven't found anything yet. No precise probability math exists, as it's incremental evolution, not because it's too impossible. That's why. The math doesn't exist because it's too impossible. This shift highlights how life adapts over time, much like we must adapt to life's unpredictability by prioritizing what matters. Conditions for templates ordering and viable functional instructions. You're questioning how inert templates, minerals, clay, could lead to ordering functional genetic instruction that direct working mechanisms rather than random junk. Process. Remember, no process. Evolution has no process. Its only process is making mistakes. Otherwise, it's trying to co-opt what was already there, pre-existing information. In biogenesis, which he has to adhere to because we're talking about where we came from, templates like clay minerals or hydrothermal vent surfaces act as scaffolds, concentrating and aligning molecules and to catalyze reaction non-randomly. Yeah, so it's going to be non-random. This leads to autocatalytic sets networks where molecules produce each other, increasing complexity. It's not about complexity, it's about instructions. It's about directed working mechanisms. And you have to have the instructions to make the mechanisms. How are you going to get the mechanisms if you don't first have the instructions and a complex where all this stuff can happen? From here, template-based replication emergence. Yeah, this is another slimy term. But I got to go now, so God bless everybody. Take care.